What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of What's in a Performance, where today we are reviewing the OG Chopin Ballade G minor interpretation performance by Krystian Zimmerman. I say OG because I've talked to quite a few people who grew up listening to this interpretation, and certainly for myself, when I was first learning the piece many years ago, I listened to Zimmerman's interpretation a lot to help formulate mine. I don't think I play much like he does anymore, but regardless, it was quite influential in how I thought about the piece at the time, and I guess it shaped a lot of how I view the piece now moving forward. And so with all that being said, let's get right to the review. It's Ballade time. Let's go. He sits a long time on the first note, and every note that follows is distinct. Some people like holding the pedal throughout the whole section. What I do tends to be a hybrid of that, where I will lift my pedal halfway for each note to clear it slightly, but retain some of the resonance from the earlier notes. So... yeah, he really sinks into that G. That Chopin disconnect between the left and right hands. The top notes really ring very clearly. Ooh, that's good emphasis. Because we hear but he pulls it back slightly so that he puts emphasis on this E flat instead. But you can hear leading up to. Like, you barely hear the chords in the middle. And then everything drops for this E flat, which holds all the tension. You can see almost it comes up slightly instead of like connecting it to give it a little bit more resonance into this left hand. Back to the left pedal. They make it very soft, very delicate. This is like one of those moments that I feel like in music, right? Like, you never really want to end a piece before you actually hit the end, right? Because then it's a little bit abrupt and a little bit jarring when something else comes. But this is one of the few moments where it feels like you do want to feel like you've ended something. You've reached the end of something, right? Because it resolves very nicely on the G. But the surprise is that it doesn't end, and it keeps going. It's supposed to be a little bit jarring. We got a lot of emphasis on the left hand. There's a lot of things that you can bring out here, right? One of the things is you can bring out the top voice, which has the held notes, or you can bring out what Zimmerman's doing, the middle voice in the left hand. This becomes one of those things where you have to pick and choose how you're going to layer everything, right? You have several layers, like you can think of this in like almost like 4 layers, right? You have the top voice, right? Then you have the voice right below it, and then you have the third layer, and then you have this bottom layer, which is just these held chords, right? And you have to pick and choose how you want to position all these things so that we have a clear sense and clear direction of what we're supposed to be hearing, right? What you want us to hear. Because if everything is equally loud, then there's nothing that our ears are particularly drawn to. And then everything sounds like a wash. But if we choose one thing to set over the others, and then choose one thing to be on the bottom, and then appropriately proportion out how we're going to fill in the rest of the layers with the remaining voices, then we got something a lot more interesting, right? And that's how interpretations can differ a lot. It's where you take off. It doesn't sit very long on these points. It's a little bit like gluey, interestingly. It starts backing off. I was about to say, because I haven't listened to this interpretation in a while, I've forgotten how straightforward he takes a lot of these. He just keeps going. But right when I was about to make a comment, then he eases off the gas for these last set of arpeggios. And so I think there's a case to be made where this sounds very, very nice. There is written collando and sforzando, but sometimes some interpretations will drive all the way to the end, right? Until this, and then we get a real ritenuto into the metamoso. Whenever you get sections like these and pieces, right, you're always thinking about beginning and ending points, even with the left hand. So, right, that's like one line, right, beginning and end, and then the next one. If I want to start a little bit stronger, then I drive to the end, right, I ease up at the end, or maybe I want to drive to the end, right, and end up a little bit stronger at the end. And the same goes for the melody, right? We're looking for specific ways how we want to phrase it. Like where the high points are. There's like speeding, a little bit more movement, so he adjusts the tempo to be a little bit faster accordingly. Ooh, that little slide there. More recent teachers pointed out to me that sometimes there's a tendency to overdo this sort of like sliding out of rhythm from both hands. So, and what I like about Zimmerman is that he saves it for a very specific time, right? He wants to draw specific attention to something. So, like these very end parts where there's a lot of tension, that's when he'll slide the left hand out of time with the right hand. Use these sorts of tools like judiciously, kind of like rubato. I guess this is a form of rubato, but I'll classify it as something slightly different. Once you've normalized something, then it no longer has the same effect when you do it again. It's like becoming desensitized to your rubatos or your tempo changes. Then you'll have to change it from there. At the moments where you really want to hit, that's when you feel the greatest impact and the greatest effect from your utilization of that tool. All right, let's let the pedal linger through those rests. Some people don't. This section is the part where it feels like your heart's bursting open with pure ecstasy and joy. I think he plays a little bit straightforward, and I don't think that's a bad thing. I think that's letting the notes speak for themselves. I'm being a little bit dramatic, right, to make a point, but instead of phrasing the left hand like something like that, he's just letting the notes like kind of have like impact, a little bit less direction than usual. There's a little bit of tempo manipulation to make everything tie together. So. And you really feel the ecstasy in the way that it just drives forward. Sometimes you can create that feeling by pulling. It holds the pedal throughout all that. I personally play a little bit more dry. It's interesting to see how it diverged. Again, good emphasis on the left hand. I think a lot of times this gets swallowed by the right hand, and so he brings these like two note combos are very important in the ballades, like across all the ballades. And it's so important to be able to down, up, to be able to phrase it properly that way. The intensity there is being carried by the left hand. I think sometimes there's a little bit more swelling and pushing and pulling from the right hand, but Zimmerman carries most of that through the left hand. The way that he uses left hand percussively with those big chords. Oh, that's so interesting. He lands with 1-3 on this B flat. And the reason for that is because you want to land with a lot of force and a lot of emphasis. And actually, I might steal this one. Typically, a lot of people will end on 5, right? You can just get into the rolled chords. And the reason why you're going 1-3 is because you want to play with your third finger so it's precise, but you want to support it with your thumb, which then also adds the thumb's weight to your playing. You can use your thumb to support other fingers too, but third finger I think is the most common simply because it's easily accessible. I love how they're right. It just keeps going and the left hand just like kind of rolls. It eases off the gas a little, so there's a little bit more time and space to breathe for this melody here. I really like the way that he eases off there at the end because it kind of like slides you into this final mano mosso section. Personally, the way that I've always played it is with a little bit more gusto. Like I want to keep driving all the way to the end. Maybe a little bit more of like I'm hitting the brakes very quickly, right? Whereas he's like downshifting, right, and then letting the car coast, which gives it a different flavor. And the left pedal again. Oh, big rest. That was very interpretive. It takes a lot of time here. I like that. I feel like at that point you want to drive to the coda, but he takes time. He creates a different mood going into this. He also doesn't hit the tempo immediately. He accelerandos slightly into it. So it's almost like easing into it for himself. A little bit easier on the performer too. Very clean, very accurate. This one's a little bit clinical. Whoa! Wait, hold on. Real quick. There's too much stuff. Alright. I feel ready. Alright, we continue. Sorry about that. Very ferocious towards the end. There's a certain charm to this where I think in sections like this, you can add a little bit of rubato, or what I would call tactical rubato. Right, so that you slow down a little so that you have a little bit of space to breathe, but you do it tastefully. But Zimmerman keeps driving. He just keeps driving to the very end. It adds to like the almost like ferocious sentiment. And a lot of this sort of playing comes from rotating the wrist. Right, you have to turn this way around the thumb flap. Right, and when you go down, you're using the force of going down to be able to accent that note with the thumb, which helps because the thumb is heavier than the other fingers, and then you come back up to play the other notes, and you have to make sure that they rotate together, right? Turn the semicircle together. For the very last one, the weight and the force comes from the upwards swing, upwards rotation of the wrist to create those accents. All of this, though, is based on rotation, and if you don't rotate, if you're just playing up and down, you can't go as fast with as much force. It will fatigue you very quickly as well. I like how he rolls that chord early. A little bit early. Again, thumb and the third finger. At this point, Chopin's just drawing out the tonic. He's already shown the G minor chord that he wants to end on. He's just like drawing it out for measures and measures on end. So much weight going into the keys even for these. Very nice. Third finger for the final note. If you're learning the ballad for the first time, I think his interpretation is like very easy to try to replicate a little bit of and then work off of to create your own. If you enjoyed that video, check out one of these videos right here where I talk about other people's playing, which I'm sure you'll find interesting because you watched this one to the very end. So I'll see you over there, and until next time, everybody, peace.